You are listening to Zimbabwe News. Keep listening to Zimbabwe News.
Once again, it's a very good morning and welcome to Early Morning News. In our top story today, outgoing Netherlands ambassador to Zimbabwe, Mrs. Barbara van Helmond, bade farewell to Zimbabwe after paying a courtesy call on President Emmerson Mnangagwa at State House in Harare this Wednesday.
The outgoing ambassador of the Netherlands, or Holland, to Zimbabwe, Mrs. Barbara van Helmond, bade farewell to the President, Comrade Emmerson Mnangagwa, at State House in Harare. Holland, or the Netherlands, point person, is also ambassador to Zambia and Malawi. The Dutch, as the people of Netherlands have always been called, have a long-standing relationship with the people of this region, having arrived at the Cape of Good Hope, South Africa, in 1652, and for years wielded so much political and economic power in that country. She spoke about her 4-year tour of duty and areas they discussed with the President Mnangagwa.
We talked about the fact that both our countries are, in both our countries, the agricultural sector is a key sector. We're both an exporting agricultural country and an economy. So we've shared experience on agriculture, and as being an exporting country, we've had, and the fact that we're supporting, the Netherlands is supporting Zimbabwe on trying to increase export of horticultural produce. We've looked back on the last 4 years. We've talked about the commitments of His Excellency the President. We've talked about the compensation of farmers. We've talked about gender-based violence, the prevalence of it, but the fact also that it's being addressed.
So the outgoing ambassador says with the ushering in of the new dispensation, the engagement and re-engagement exercise is actually reasserting relations between Zimbabwe and the rest of the world. It should be realized that Netherlands is one country where Zimbabwe exports a lot of horticultural produce. Daily there are flights into Holland from Zimbabwe. It is also a very interesting thing that the bilateral relations between Holland and Zimbabwe are on the mend. Ruben Barwe, ZBC News, State House.
In our next story, the arrival of another 800,000 Sinopharm COVID-19 vaccines this Wednesday has put Zimbabwe in a strong position to achieve herd immunity as compared to its peers around the African continent.
There are only a few times in the history of mankind when all nations on the globe have been subjected to a huge calamity at the same time. In such a way, the COVID-19 pandemic has ravaged every economy, claiming lives at such a disproportionate way. How individual governments have responded to such pandemics is indeed a litmus test. Hence, the arrival of yet another batch of 800,000 Sinopharm vaccines at the Robert Gabriel Mugabe International Airport this Wednesday is another important milestone in boosting the vaccine drive, which has seen Zimbabwe outperforming its peers on the continent.
We are really indeed grateful to the President and his team of ministers. I'm sure you all see the media that vaccines are in short supply. Most of the African countries, developing countries, are struggling to get these vaccines. But in Zimbabwe, we have so far managed to get well over 5.2 million doses. That is really commendable.
The vaccine rollout is in itself a mammoth task, let alone setting aside resources to procure the doses.
Everything that we have seen so far is now procurement by the government of Zimbabwe. And we have been receiving procured vaccines since March, when we received the first 1.2 million Sinovac. If we vaccinate at least 10 million people in the country, we'll be assured of achieving herd immunity.
Treasury has announced that a further $100 million has been set aside for vaccine procurement, confirming that the targeted herd immunity will be achieved in the not-so-distant future. The country will again receive a batch of 700,000 vaccines this Thursday, bringing the total number of vaccines received in just a week to 2,500,000. Owen Mandova, ZBC News, Harare.
We continue with more health news, where the country has recorded remarkable uptake of the COVID-19 vaccine, with an additional 500,000 jabs being administered within the past week.
COVID-19 vaccine is hitting full throttle, with the majority rushing to receive the first jab, as the country recorded an impressive jump on its vaccinated statistics by an additional 500,000 in just a week. Having struggled with figures that stood at less than 80,000 in March this year, the current daily trend of at least 30,000 vaccinations paints a positive outlook for the country's vaccination drive in the fight against the pandemic.
We started a little bit slow, but this past week when His Excellency extended the lockdown and specifically indicated that we need to really buckle up and ramp up our vaccination during this lockdown period, that's exactly what has happened. Numbers have shot up. You see the queues out there, people coming out in their numbers. That is fantastic. We just need to continue on that trajectory.
The country's vaccination drive has fared well since the end of April, which recorded 414,730 vaccinations, which increased to 675,678 in May and hitting close to 800,000 by end of June. Thanks to change of attitude and awareness, more people are willing to get the jab.
We are equally excited, by the high intake, especially in the rural communities. As we are aware that at the beginning there was low uptake, especially in rural areas. But at the moment we are seeing, a stampede, of people who are, visiting health facilities, to get vaccinated.
While the figures are remarkable, they are still far short of the daily target of 60,000 vaccinations.
We have decided to come to those communities, help them to have the vaccines, regardless of those myths which are being speculated on social media.
Private players have also become a vital cog to complement government's vaccination program.
If our community is protected, is healthy, therefore we are also protected and healthy.
Zimbabwe currently tops the African region vaccination status, according to the latest release issued on the 23rd of this month. Theophilus Chuma, ZBC News, Harare.
Now look at our final story in our early morning news. The Mental Health Tribunal Board is meeting in Harare to review applications and appeals of patients detained in special institutions.
The 7-member Tribunal Board on Mental Health has in just 2 days considered 74 applications and appeals for patients detained in special institutions and other places before making a decision on their release. Chairperson of the tribunal, retired Justice Matthews Cheddar, spoke on the cases which are under consideration.
We had 38 cases which we reviewed and finalized. We have got about 42 matters which we are also looking at in order to determine if they are suitable for release or otherwise we do so.
Justice Cheddar also appealed to communities to embrace the released patients and render them the necessary support.
They are not criminals. They are released because the doctors are now satisfied that they can be integrated in society without much problems. So do not regard them as made people, perpetually made people. We must take them on. They are actually recover better when they are in their home environment, as long as, and I emphasize, as long as we monitor their medication.
The Mental Health Tribunal Board consists of psychologists, senior mental health nurses, lawyers and physiologists. Memory Chamisa, ZBC News, Harare.
Well, that's all we had for you in terms of early morning news. And now coming up next is a press review. And today we'll be looking at the Herald, the Chronicle, the Newsday, Umthunywa, always my favorite paper there. But remember, it is... we implore you, please go out there and buy the actual newspapers. We here at GMZ, we just give you a snippet of the headlines so that we just entice you a little bit so you go and actually buy the newspapers. Press review up next.
Let's get straight into our press review. Our first story coming from the Newsday, with the headlines are reading: Environmental laws should address disputes. Story by Praise-More Stole. Now, Environmental Minister Mangaliso Ndlovu has been urged to ensure that the Environmental Management Act, Chapter 20, Subsection 27, is amended to include clauses that facilitate the resolution of coal exploration disputes. This was said on Monday by the Parliamentary Portfolio Committee on Environment, which expressed concern over coal exploration disputes, especially in the Inde area in Hwange, where a Chinese firm, Bayfire Investment, has been embroiled in a wrangle with the community. MP said some mining exploration activities were contaminating water used by the communities. In our next story there, my headliner reads, also still with the Newsday, headliner reads, government okays Johnson & Johnson vaccine. A story by Vanessa Gonye. Now, Zimbabwe has authorized the emergency use of COVID-19 vaccine AD26-CoV2/. S, commonly referred to as Johnson & Johnson, manufactured by Janssen Biologics. The Johnson & Johnson vaccine becomes the fifth to be approved for use in the country after the Chinese Sinopharm and the Sinovac, and the Russia's Sputnik V and the Indian Covaxin. Now, the Johnson & Johnson drug becomes the first Western vaccine to be approved by the MCAZ amid fierce resistance from government bureaucracies. Now, moving on to Umtunywa.
You know, I love this particular newspaper. So we're going to be reading from Umtunywa, and the headline reads, Ufuna amakhosikazi angu 17. All right, now the story reads, Lesifiso sokuchata amakhosikazi angu 17. Unumzana Johani 14 Thembu oleminyaka engu 50 okwazikhalenele. Uveza ukuthi ngabe usemthathile unkosikazi wesitshiyagalombili kodwa kwaphazamiswa ngokuhlaselwa kwe-COVID-19 lokwaholela okutheni adlulisele phambili izinhlelo zakhe zokushada. I can only imagine there, this particular gentleman was aged 50, wanted to marry his 17th bride, but because of COVID-19 could not go further with that particular marriage. All right, we move on to the next story. Still with Umtunywa, it is a story by Ethel Ngube, and the headline reads, Kubotshwa izimota ezingu-171 ezephulwe umthetho ye-COVID-19 eGweru. Right, amapolisa eZimbabwe Republic Police esabelweni senkabazweni asexwayise uZulu ukuba ekele ukwephula imithetho ebekiwe okunqanda ukumemetheka kwe-COVID-19. Amapolisa esabelweni se-Midlands axwayise uZulu ukuthi ekele ukugada izimota kwamanye amadolobho ukuthi ngoba kuthiwa sebebophe izimota ezingu-171. All right, that is that story from the Umtunywa. This is by Ethel Ngube, and she just reports that in the Midlands province, the police, that's the Zimbabwe Republic Police, have arrested 171 vehicles who have broken the laws because of that ban that we have at the moment for intercity travel. Then they are actually advising the population in that area that please, can we stop getting onto cars that are going via intercities and all of that. Please stay in your cities. All right, Farai, we are now moving to the Chronicle. What's happening in the Chronicle?
Moving on to the Chronicle, our first story. The headliner reads, 110 pregnant women catch COVID-19. A story by Leonard Ngube in the Victoria Falls Reporter. Now, more than 100 pregnant women have been quarantined in Matabeleland North after they tested positive for COVID-19. Matabeleland North Provincial Medical Director Dr. Munekai Padingani confirmed that 110 expecting mothers had been quarantined at 3 hospitals in the province. 70 of these are at Binga District Hospital, 37 at Cholocho District Hospital, while 3 are at Lukosi Hospital in Wange. What more stories there's in the Chronicle?
Absolutely. We are still with the Chronicle. Now we're turning to the arts pages. And this is a story by Mtabisi Chuma, who's the showbiz correspondent. And the headline reads, a radio personality, Sokostina, makes a midnight comeback. Now today marks the return of radio personality Sokostina, a.k.a. the Queen Monkey herself, the real name Tendai Garwe, on the airwaves, as she will host the Midnight Express on Star FM from midnight, breaking the 2-year hiatus in the radio spectrum. Now the show will take place daily between midnight and 3 a.m. and we'll see Sokostina taking over the mic from Saki Crazy, Godfather Templeman, and DJ Ave every Thursday.
Definitely an exciting development there with regards to the airwaves. Also looking forward to more developments that will be taking place. And however, that's all that we do have in our press review at the moment. We'll take a short break, and when we come back, we'll be looking at more right here on GMZ. Stay tuned. Got quite a few people there engaging with us on our social media.
Absolutely. I see a lot of people actually enjoying the press review. A few comments here and there on our social media pages, or a Facebook page that's ZBC News Online. But obviously, just a quick shout outs once more. Malino Eniatakundwa, Carlos Index, Tibapi Zivani, Mailora Changana, Kudakwashe Madondo, Petronella Nyamanza, Shaim Kulungu, Lakson Motsakani, Abraham Chimvuto, Daniel Fachi. Host we have Honorable Dexter Dina, good morning. We also have Petronella Shoko, Talent Duru, as well as host we have here Edgins Abraham. So yeah, very interesting conversation that's going on our Facebook page.
That's it. You too can be part of the conversation. All you have to do is get on our Facebook page. That's ZBC News Online. Now, shortly, we'll be getting into our business breakfast. We'll be looking at fiscal policy arrangements here in Zimbabwe in line with the midterm policy, and also moving into Qatar around flight awareness there, and then touching on some developments in China. Business breakfast coming up. All eyes will be on the 2021 midterm fiscal policy review, which will be presented by the Minister of Finance and Economic Development, Professor Mthuli Ncube, today.
And Treasury has been commended for fulfilling a difficult task since 2018, and each year it has managed to meet most of its targets, which has culminated in the much cherished economic stability obtaining in the country. President of the Confederation of Zimbabwe Retailers, Mr. Denford Mutashu, notes that increasing civil servant salaries, as announced by government, speaks highly of how fiscal books have been balanced, something Professor Mthuli Ncube should aim to consolidate through Thursday's mid-term policy review.
Government constitutes 60% of general economic business in the country. So the awarding of salaries and incentives to civil servants is a key milestone because it has got a positive impact on the general production and productivity.
The fiscal policy review will seek to further harness resource mobilization for infrastructure rehabilitation, an area which government has done very well without external financing.
It's a budget which needs somehow to militate and strengthen the agenda on devolution, given that if you look at the road infrastructure in the country, especially the major cities, it's in bad state. You can't compare even with the highways. So if we could work on making sure that devolution, if it means the Constituency Development Fund is revised but still retained, it's very important.
However, Chairperson of the Budget and Finance Committee, Dr. Matthew Nyashanu, sees the mid-term review as the window to mitigate the unexpected headwinds weighing against the economy due to COVID-19.
Our recourse is to domestic resource mobilization. So we must be able to capacitate ZIMRA so that ZIMRA is able to mobilize resources for the country.
6 months into the implementation of the 2021 national budget, the government is satisfied with how the economy is progressing, with the latest inflation figures giving hope of further improvements in the economy. Owen Mandova, ZBC News, Harare.
Let's take a look at aviation news, where Qatar Airways is set to resume flights into Zimbabwe in a major boost for the country's quest to become a competitive tourism and investment destination.
The global airline industry is recuperating from the ravages of the COVID-19 pandemic, having incurred huge losses during the lockdown last year. With air travel resuming, global airlines are choosing their destinations wisely, preferring countries which have sound COVID-19 response strategies. This week, global airliner Qatar Airways announced the plans to resume servicing the Harare route in a stamp of approval for the country as a safe destination.
This is a testimony that our country continues to attract global airlines and is a destination of choice amongst tourists and potential investors, courtesy of the bold and transformative policies being implemented by the Second Republic.
This comes a month after German airliner Lufthansa announced the plans to become the first European intercontinental airliner to fly into Victoria Falls, further affirming the country's growing influence in the global economy. Owen Mandova, ZBC News, Harare.
Our next story, the plastic recycling industry is facing several challenges accelerated by the COVID-19 pandemic, which now threatens society's commitment to transition to a sustainable plastic economy. We now link up with Ngoni Kangara, a player in the plastic recycling industry from Conducts, who engages in more deliveries around plastics. We'll be also looking very closely at some of the significant measures that are put in place to ensure that we do recycle. And recycling also speaks towards engaging conservation within the environment, and is very important to ensure that we do maintain a sustainability. There also are some economic benefits that one can be able to appreciate from recycling, and also be able to take advantage of those opportunities, especially here in Zimbabwe. We see that the collection of cans, collection of bottles, and also plastic containers are those being put together to ensure that they can be bought and are put in place for recycling. Now, we are joined by Ngoni Kangara, a player in the plastic recycling industry. Good morning, Ngoni, and can you give us a brief background to the plastic recycling?
Good morning, Zimbabwe. My name is Ngoni Kangara, and thank you for welcoming into your homes. I'd like to give you a brief overview and background of the recycling business in Zimbabwe. Recycling started albeit at a lower pace late basically in the 80s, when people used to collect waste plastic strip, and they could manufacture or weave baskets at a local level, and normally these were for personal use, and thereafter the baskets were being sold within the neighborhood or in various other marketplaces. As time went by, people started collecting waste at a greater deal. I would like to believe at one point plastic waste was being used to manufacture floor polish. Plastic became more useful as an industry.